class, in this video we're going over Unit 3, which is on the integumentary system, which is the skin, okay? So it includes, of course, the skin, but also hair, nails, and the glands associated with the skin, so sweat and oil glands, okay? And then also sensory receptors found in the skin. So we have tactile receptors, which are touch receptors, pressure receptors, temperature, things like that. So all those sensory receptors found in the skin, okay? So the integumentary system, of course, helps to protect the body, right? It helps the body to maintain its temperature, okay, through things like sweating. It converts inactive vitamin D into its active form. It provides sensory information through those sensory receptors that I just talked about, and helps to maintain homeostasis. It's also a blood reservoir and has a few different functions we'll talk about in more detail. Okay, so there's two major layers of the skin. So we have the epidermis, that's the most superficial layer. Okay, so epidermis. And then underneath that is the dermis. Together, these make up the cutaneous membrane. Okay, basically the skin. And then there's a layer underneath that's blood vessels and fat tissue. That's the hypodermis, also known as the subcutaneous layer. But I'll just write hypodermis, but you should know either word, okay? Hypodermis or subcutaneous layer, okay? So it's composed of areolar connective tissue, that like packing material of the body, and adipose, so that's fat tissue. So it's like a fat layer underneath the skin. Okay, so there's lots of different things going on in the skin. I think I'll go through that in a separate video where I could show you the PowerPoint, so I don't have to draw it, because it'd be very difficult to draw out the skin, okay? So let's talk about some of the things that we can talk about here. So there's four major types of cells found within the epidermis, okay? So we have keratinocytes, okay? So they produce keratin, okay? That protein that we talked about that's on the outside of our skin. Remember, we had keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, so keratin is what is on the outside of that, okay? So keratinocytes produce that keratin. So it's a major cell found in the epidermis, and it's tightly connected, they're tightly connected via desmosomes, okay? And that's what falls off. So when we have dead skin falling off, that's those keratinocytes, okay? So major cells in the epidermis. Okay, keratinocytes. Okay, then we have melanocytes. Okay, so these are located in the deepest layer of the epidermis, which would be the basal layer. I'll talk about the layers soon as well. So they produce a pigment, one of the three skin pigments we'll talk about, called melanin, okay? And this is what gives skin its coloring. So melanosomes, the cells that are produced by the melanocytes, okay, or they're packaged in melanosomes, okay, are transferred to the keratinocytes, okay? And there they help to protect the nucleus from UV damage, okay? So this is why we get tan in the summer if we spend a lot of time out in the sun, okay? More melanin is going to be produced to protect our skin from UV damage, okay? Then we have dendritic cells, also known as Langerhans cells. Dendritic cells. Okay, so these are macrophages, which are a type of immune cell. So they just patrol the epidermis to take care of any foreign substances that may be in or on the skin. Okay, so they help to activate the immune system if they find something that's worth fighting. Okay, then we have tactile cells. Remember, tactile means touch, like those tactile receptors or touch receptors. Okay, so tactile, also known as Merkel cells. So these are just touch receptors. So they're sensory receptors that sense touch. Okay, and these are found in the lowest layer as well, the basal layer. Okay, we have two types of skin. I'm going to erase this here. We have thin skin and thick skin. Okay. So most of our skin is thin skin. Okay, so thin skin. And has 4 layers. But thin skin is also hairy skin. So we have hair on all of our thin skin. But thick skin is hairless skin. Okay, hair doesn't grow in our thick skin. And it has an extra layer. So it has 5 layers. Okay, we'll go through each of the layers. Thick skin is only found on the palms and the surface, the front of our fingers, on our hands and the soles of our feet. Okay, and the bottom of our toes as well. Okay. So it's in areas where we have lots of abrasion, so we want a little bit of extra protection on our thick skin, right? We stand on our feet all the time, our hands do lots of different things, so we need that extra layer and the extra protection there, okay? So let's go from superficial to deep. So I'll write here superficial to deepest layer, and I'll name all the layers and I'll put a little star next to the layer that is only found in thick skin. Okay, so superficial, we have the stratum. So stratum is like a layer, okay, like a strata, so it's a layer. Okay, so strata corneum is the most superficial layer. Okay, and it's many layers of the keratinocytes, and so it's many layers of those dead keratinocytes. So those are the ones that fall off all of the time. Okay, then we have the stratum lucidum. This is the one that's only found in thick skin. So I'll put little asterisks there. Okay, and it's actually not a thick layer. This is not what gives thick skin its thickness, really. In thick skin, the stratum corneum has a lot more layers to it as well, which makes it a bit thicker. But the stratum lucidum is found only in thick skin, not in thin skin. Okay. Then we have the stratum granulosum, and under the microscope, it looks darker stained because it has these little granules within it. Okay, then we have the stratum spinosum. Okay, and this is many layers as well, many layers deep. And then the deepest layer is the stratum basal, like remember the basement or basal membrane, right? So stratum basal. But this is all part of the epidermis. The dermis is going to have connective tissue, okay? So stratum corneum, if we're talking about thin skin here, it goes stratum corneum, granulosum, spinosum, basal. If we're talking about thick skin, we have this extra layer. So it goes corneum lucidum, granulosum, spinosum, basal. And the basal is only, the strata basal is only one layer of cells, okay? And again, this would hold those melanocytes and also the tactile cells or the touch cells. Okay, so in the epidermis, like I said, the dead cells are on the top. The cells die off by apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. So the cell decides it's no longer useful, and it programs its own cell death. Okay, so those dead cells come off as dandruff or dander. So we can shed about 50,000 cells per minute. So we shed lots of dead skin, but it's very, very small, so we don't typically notice it all the time. Okay. When that happens, the basal cells, which is it's always happening. So these basal cells are constantly dividing to make new cells. And then it pushes the older ones up until it gets to the stratum corneum where they can fall off. Okay. This whole process of the cell moving up to the stratum corneum takes about 4 weeks. So it takes about a month to occur. Okay, so that just shows you how quickly those cells are falling off. Okay. Okay, so that's the epidermis. Now let's talk about the dermis. So that's the next layer of skin. Remember the cutaneous membrane, we have the epidermis, then we have the dermis right underneath it, okay? Okay, so dermis has 2 layers to it, or 2 regions, really, they're not really layers, 2 regions, okay? So dermis, we have the papillary region, okay? And we have the reticular region. So this is a small, it's about 1/5 of the dermis, and it consists of areolar connective tissue. Okay, and it has collagen fibers and elastic fibers within it as well. Okay, so it has dermal ridges. So you'll learn about papillae a few times, like when you get to the heart and the kidney in A&P2. But papillae are usually muscle that kind of sticks out like this. Okay, so in the papillary region, we have the epidermis, and then we have these ridges, these epidermal ridges. Okay, and so this is the start of the dermis, and then the epidermis has these little papillae that fit into it nicely. And it fits in really perfectly. So right underneath where these papillae are, this would be the papillary region. And then we have more of the dermis. So this whole region from here to here would be the papillary region. Okay, and then this whole region here would be the reticular. Okay, and again, this is just dermis. We'd have epidermis above it as well. Okay.